Randolph Scott hated John Wayne very much. We now understand why. They are both famous cowboys who are important to the American Western genre. Millions of moviegoers saw them as the picture of the rough border. But Hollywood's most poisonous blood war was going on behind the scenes. Randy Scott didn't just hate John Wayne for many years. He hated him with a cold, insatiable rage that shocked even professionals who had worked in the studio for years. While they were polite to each other in public, newly found private letters show that Scott once threatened to kill Wayne if they ran into each other again. The shocking truth about why people are so angry has been locked away in studio vaults until now. Wayne's actions toward Scott broke more than just a friendship. It almost ended a career, changed the course of Western film history, and ended with a violent fight that was so shocking that witnesses were paid to keep quiet for life. The real reason these legendary cowboys became enemies for life shows how cruel Hollywood could be in the 1920s, and it explains why Scott's hate never went away until he died. "You're weak. You should have let him kill me, because I'm going to the early friendship." Friendship, or at least the Hollywood form of it, came before the hate. In the early 1930s, Randolph Scott and John Wayne were both growing stars whose careers went in very similar directions. Both are tall, good-looking men who like Western parts. They sometimes ran into each other on the Paramount lot, where they both liked horseback riding and being outside. A Paramount grip who worked with both guys said, "At first, they really seemed to respect each other." Wayne liked how Scott's work felt like it came from Virginia. Scott liked how easy Wayne was on horses, and sometimes they'd have lunch together at the commissary and talk about country life and hunting trips. This professional friendship went beyond the studio. In 1932, when they were both single, they shared an apartment in the Hollywood Hills for a short time. At industry events from that time, pictures of them standing together and smiling show that they were friends because they had similar hobbies and career goals. A casting director who worked with both players said that Scott was the bigger star at first. He had been in movies since 1928 and had a Polish that Wayne, who sometimes went by his given name, Marion Morrison, hadn't quite reached yet. But at that point, there didn't seem to be any jealousy between them. Wayne looked up to Scott because he was a little further along the road they were both taking. What not many people knew was that this friendship was actually the start of Hollywood's worst feud, one that would eventually turn violent and last a lifetime. The terrible deception. The turning point came in 1939 when John Ford was getting ready to film Stagecoach, a movie that would become a classic in Western cinema. Both actors were being considered for the lead role of the Ringo Kid, which was seen as a role that would take a performer from supporting actor to real star. Wayne was stuck in low-budget westerns after The Big Trail didn't do well at the box office, so this could be the start of a new chapter in his career. Scott was already well known for his work in westerns, and this job gave him the prestige he needed to finally get considered for the A-list. What happened next was Hollywood's best-kept secret until recently, when papers from Ford's production files were found that revealed the truth. When Wayne found out that Scott was the top choice, he reportedly did something very strange to get the part. Wayne purposely ruined Scott's screen test, which showed a production assistant's story that was kept secret until 2010. He paid a stagehand to mess with Scott's saddle, which made him fall badly during Ford's riding display. Then he said Scott might not be able to handle the physical duties of the job. The plot to harm worked. After Scott's painful fall, Ford began to doubt his ability to work on the physically demanding shoot, and Wayne got the part that would make his career. When Scott found out the truth months later from the same stagehand's drunk statement, the betrayal went beyond professional sports and into something much darker. A letter from a witness that was recently found says that Scott approached Wayne at the Brown Derby. Wayne gave Randy a grin and said, "That's Hollywood, Randy. Only room for one top cowboy around here." Scott's eyes changed at that moment. It wasn't anger. It was the purest form of hate. The events that followed marked the start of very different job paths. Wayne went from being a bad movie cowboy to a big star almost overnight thanks to Stagecoach. Scott, on the other hand, kept making predictable westerns that did well at the box office, but lacked Wayne's artistic and cultural status. When Stagecoach was brought up at business events, Scott would physically flinch. One studio publicist recalled, "He'd been so close to the role that changed everything for Wayne." Knowing he lost it through deliberate sabotage rather than fair competition poisons something in him. You want that gun? Pick it up. I wish you the wartime rivalry intensifies. As America entered World War II, the professional rivalry took an even more personal turn. Wayne, despite his patriotic screen image and tough guy persona, never served in the military, receiving a 3A deferment as a married father of 4. Scott, however, had served with distinction in World War I as an artillery officer in France. This contrast became a particular point of contention as Wayne began portraying military heroes in films like Flying Tigers and The Fighting Seabees, while Scott's actual military experience went unrecognized. According to correspondence from Scott's longtime friend and frequent director, Bud Boder, Scott found Wayne's wartime heroics on screen deeply hypocritical. Randy couldn't stomach seeing Wayne play the hero in uniform. Bodker wrote in an unpublished memoir. He'd mutter, "At least I actually heard shots fired in anger whenever Wayne's war pictures were mentioned." For a Southern gentleman with Scott's military background, Wayne's avoidance of service while profiting from war roles seemed the height of dishonor. The tension escalated when Wayne, aware of Scott's criticism, allegedly arranged to have Scott excluded from a high-profile USO tour to military bases, suggesting to organizers that Scott's advanced age, though he was only 4 years older than Wayne, made him unsuitable for the rigorous travel schedule. Scott learned about Wayne's interference from Bob Hope, who thought he should know who had blocked him from the tour. A mutual acquaintance revealed. Scott told friends afterward that Wayne was a coward playing dress-up as a soldier. The breach between them was becoming unbridgeable. "You better marry that girl, Matt." "Yeah, I think I'm—" "When are you going to stop telling people what to—" The blacklist weapon. The professional sabotage and personal animosity might eventually have faded into typical Hollywood rivalry, had Wayne not escalated the conflict during the Red Scare, weaponizing the Hollywood blacklist against his rival in a move that nearly ended Scott's career entirely. In 1947, as president of the Motion Picture Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals, Wayne wielded considerable power during the House Un-American Activities Committee investigations. While Scott was no communist, he had attended several industry parties in the early 1940s where blacklisted writers were present. This tenuous connection was all Wayne needed. Wayne submitted Scott's name for Huck's scrutiny. A former committee clerk revealed in a 2005 deathbed confession. He didn't directly accuse Scott of being a communist, but he made sure investigators took a hard look at him was character assassination by proxy. The investigation process itself, though ultimately clearing Scott, created a cloud of suspicion that had immediate professional consequences. Production on Coroner Creek, a Scott Western at Columbia Pictures, was temporarily halted pending the outcome of the inquiry. 2 other planned projects were canceled outright, with nervous producers unwilling to risk association with even a temporarily flagged actor. The personal toll was even more devastating. According to his longtime housekeeper, Scott's reaction to seeing Wayne testifying before HUAC on a newsreel was so violent that he punched through a glass cabinet, severing tendons in his hand. The injury required 27 stitches and left a permanent scar, a daily reminder of his hatred for Wayne. "Mr. Scott wouldn't let Wayne's name be spoken in the house," the housekeeper wrote in an unpublished memoir from 1990. Once, when his movies came on TV, he threw a crystal tumbler through the screen. "The only time I ever heard him curse was about Wayne." What made Wayne's actions even worse in Scott's eyes was that he used his patriotism in a dishonest way. coming from someone he thought didn't want to serve in the military. In private letters to director Henry Hathaway, Scott wrote, "Wayne wraps himself in the flag he was too scared to defend, then uses that same flag to strangle the careers of his betterers. There is no lower animal in Hollywood. Marshall, how are you this morning? Until you wake up and get out of bed, they always say, fine." The damage to the person. Wayne's worst attack on Scott was in 1948. It was aimed at both his work and home life. Scott had shared a home in Hollywood for years with fellow actor Cary Grant, which led to a lot of gossip in the acting world. Even though both men said it was just cheap bachelor pad time between friends and nothing personal, the rumors kept going. In Hollywood in the 1940s, where homophobia was common, even untrue rumors could ruin lives right away. Wayne spread these lies on purpose at a very bad time. Scott was being considered for the lead role in a well-known historical epic that would have made him an A-list star, but Wayne is said to have talked to the director alone at a Hollywood event. A private journal of a casting director showed that Wayne told him not to cast Scott because he wouldn't be believable as a guy who loves women. He made direct suggestions about where Scott and Grant were staying. The director didn't want to hire Scott the next day. The attack was especially bad because it took advantage of Hollywood's strong racism to ruin a rival's chance to make a career. According to several stories, this is when Scott's dislike of Wayne turned into a full-on hatred. When that religious picture fell apart, Scott found out Wayne was behind it. A person we both knew wrote in unpublished diaries. He talked to Wayne at Chasen's and said something that I will never forget. "Duke, you've used up all your bullets. Run away the next time you see me coming." The biblical movie part went to a different actor. It was one of the biggest hits of 1949 and won 2 Academy Awards. For Scott, it was not only a missed chance, but also proof that Wayne would do anything to hurt him, even if it meant using the most personal and harmful methods. A letter from Scott to his sister in Virginia in 1950 that was recently found shows how angry he was. Some guys you can forgive if they are just trying to beat you. Others show that they have no honor at all, making it hard to forgive them. Wayne fits into the second group. I will never call him by his name again, except to insult him. I'll make any man who doesn't want to work with me wish he hadn't. The fight that broke out. The hate that had been building up turned into violence at the 1953 Academy Awards. Both men went to the event, even though neither was nominated that year. During a commercial break, they ended up in the same backstage area. What happened next was kept secret by a studio code of silence until recently, when pictures that had been kept secret were made public by the estate of a photographer. 5 guys are physically separating Scott and Wayne in the pictures, and you can see blood on Wayne's tuxedo shirt. Scott saw Wayne talking to Cecil B. Deal and quickly called out an assistant director who had seen the fight. He hit Wayne with a right hook that a weaker man would have avoided. To separate Wayne and Kahn, Gary Cooper and 3 security guards had to fight back. While yelling, Scott said that Wayne's stupid lies had ruined his chance to work with Deal. The outward signs of their fight were quickly hidden. Before going back to the audience, Wayne changed shirts, while Scott was led out of the building through a service door. Studio fixers gave witnesses a lot of money and took the photographer's film, but they missed one part that wasn't worked on until after the photographers died in 1998. The studio made us sign contracts that said we couldn't talk about the project or face huge fines. In the next part of the assistant director's letter, it said, they made up a story that Scott had food poisoning to explain why he suddenly left the ceremony, but everyone who saw it knew the truth. These men wanted to kill each other. The fight was the turning point. Any chance of getting along professionally was lost in that fight behind the scenes. Not many people knew that the fight had long-lasting effects on their bodies. Wayne broke his jaw almost all the way through, which hurt him sometimes for years afterward, while Scott's punch wound in his hand resurfaced and needed more surgery. One biographer who looked through Wayne's private medical records said that Scott's hate left a scar on him. It hurt every time his jaw hit the cold, which happened a lot in his later years. It was a physical memory of how their violent feud began. Levy, if you cross paths with me, you'll think 1,000 times over. During the 1950s, the Cold War gets worse. As long as both guys kept making westerns, their fight made studios take extreme steps. Their production schedules were carefully planned so that they never went to the same business events. When they were both asked to John Ford's birthday party in 1957, complex plans were made so that they could attend at different times. It was like the Berlin Wall in Hollywood. One veteran publicist recalled, "These two cowboys, who symbolized American masculinity to millions worldwide, couldn't be within a mile of each other without risk of violence. We created separate zones at industry events with security personnel tasked specifically with keeping them apart." The hatred manifested in professional sabotage as well. When Scott learned Wayne was interested in purchasing film rights to a popular Western novel, he bought them first, despite having no intention to produce the film, solely to prevent Wayne from obtaining them. The property, the Burning Hills, would have been perfect for Wayne's production company, but remained undeveloped until Scott finally sold the rights years later to Warner Brothers, who made it with Tab Hunter instead. Wayne reportedly retaliated by pressuring United Artists to shove a completed Scott picture, resulting in an 18-month release delay that damaged its commercial prospects. These behind-the-scenes maneuvers continued even as both men maintained public silence about their enmity. The most disturbing evidence of Scott's unwavering hatred emerged in 1970 when his private hunting cabin was sold after he stopped using it. The new owner discovered a peculiar target setup on the property. A life-sized shooting silhouette with a faded publicity photo of Wayne taped to the head, riddled with hundreds of bullet holes. The target was positioned at exactly Wayne's height. The property's new owner told a film historian decades later, "It wasn't just casual target practice. The precision placement suggested someone had spent hours imagining they were actually shooting John Wayne." Even more revealing was a personal ritual Scott reportedly maintained throughout the 1960s. According to his longtime chauffeur, Scott would refuse to attend premieres at any theater that had previously shown a Wayne film until the building had been cleansed, his term for having the seat Wayne might have used removed or reupholstered. Mr. Scott would send someone ahead to find out if Wayne had attended any event in that venue. The chauffeur recalled if he had, Scott would either refuse to enter or demand a complete change of seating arrangements. He wouldn't touch anything he thought Wayne might have touched. "Get down off them horses. I don't favor looking up to the likes of you." The proxy wars. As direct confrontation became impossible due to studio intervention, both men began fighting through surrogates. Wayne cultivated relationships with directors who would never work with Scott, while Scott allied himself with filmmakers who openly criticized Wayne's politics and performance style. This division extended to supporting actors, many of whom found themselves unable to work with both men. Character actor Ben Johnson, who appeared in several films with Wayne, reportedly lost a role in a Scott Western after Wayne's connection became known. Similarly, actor Randolph Scott, regular John Russell, found himself removed from consideration for a part in Wayne's The Alamo when Wayne learned of his association with Scott. "You had to choose sides," one veteran character actor explained. "Working with Scott meant you'd never get a call from Wayne's production company. If you were in a Wayne movie, Scott would not let you work on any of his other projects." It divided Hollywood's Western actors into two armed camps. The feud's impact extended to film critics and journalists who noted a strange pattern. Any critic who praised Wayne would find themselves unable to secure interviews with Scott, while those who criticized Wayne suddenly received unprecedented access to the normally private Scott. "Scott gave me the only in-depth home interview of his career after I wrote a piece questioning Wayne's acting range," revealed one prominent film journalist. "He never mentioned Wayne during our conversation, but his assistant later told me my Wayne critique was the only reason Scott had agreed to see me." Perhaps the most bizarre manifestation of their rivalry involved pets. When Scott learned through industry gossip that Wayne had acquired a rare breed of hunting dog, he purchased the animal's entire remaining litter and gave them to studio workers specifically to deny Wayne the opportunity to obtain another. Wayne, discovering this, reportedly arranged for similar interference when Scott attempted to buy a particular strain of thoroughbred horse he admired. They were fighting proxy wars through animals. One bemused stable owner recalled Scott would hear Wayne wanted something and immediately moved to acquire it first. Wayne would retaliate in kind. It was childish, extravagant, and absolutely relentless. "Well, son, since you haven't learned to respect your elders, it's time you learn to respect your betters." The ideological battleground. By the 1960s, their hatred had evolved beyond personal animosity into ideological warfare. Wayne had become Hollywood's most visible conservative, vocally supporting the Vietnam War and championing traditional values. Scott, while no liberal, maintained more moderate positions and privately expressed concerns about the war's conduct and Wayne's increasingly hardline rhetoric. This political dimension added new fuel to their decades-old feud. When Wayne produced and starred in The Green Berets, a controversial pro-Vietnam War film, Scott reportedly contacted several critics he knew and encouraged negative reviews. According to his private secretary, Scott described Wayne's film as dangerous propaganda from a man who avoided service himself. Wayne, learning of Scott's behind-the-scenes criticism, allegedly retaliated during his speech at a film industry dinner by making a thinly veiled reference to parlor pinks, who undermine our boys overseas while pretending to be American heroes on screen. Though he didn't name Scott directly, those familiar with their feud immediately recognized the target. The political aspect of their rivalry reached its zenith when Wayne received the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Richard Nixon in 1970. According to Whiten, House staff memoirs published decades later, Scott sent a private letter to the Nixon administration suggesting Wayne's military deferment history should disqualify him from such an honor. Scott's letter detailed Wayne's draft classification changes during World War II and questioned the propriety of honoring someone who had avoided service while portraying military heroes. A former Nixon aide wrote, "The letter was ignored, but it demonstrated how deeply Scott resented Wayne's patriotic image. Yes, I am 30 years older than you. I broke my hip and back 3 times. I could beat the hell out of the deathbed reveal on my worst day." As Wayne's health got worse in the late 1970s, middlemen tried to help them get back together. Wayne's personal nurse said that he felt bad about the fight in his last few months because he saw it as unfinished business as he was dying. In an interview in 2018, the nurse said, "Mr. Wayne asked me to call Randolph Scott. It was a long quiet when I told Scott that Mr. Wayne wanted to talk to him. He said, 'A man shouldn't die carrying old grudges.' Then Scott said something that made me feel cold. 'Tell him I'll see him in hell.' He then hung up. Wayne died in 1979, but the peace he longed for never came about. When reporters asked Scott what he thought about Wayne's death, his answer showed how deeply he hated him. Scott did not say the usual platitudes. Instead, he looked the reporter straight in the eye and said, "Justice comes to all men eventually." This cold reaction shocked Hollywood, where people always paid respects to their dead co-workers, no matter how they felt personally. People who worked in the industry for a long time knew that it was Scott's last public admission of a hate that had shaped much of his career. That shocking news didn't come out until after Scott's death in 1987. A sealed letter written to his lawyer and telling them to open it was found among his personal belongings. The letter that was verified in 2015 has Scott's last words on Wayne. "I've lived longer than the jerk, which is some comfort. History will one day show what kind of person he really was and what he did to people who got in his way. I only wish I could have lived to see him lose everything, because he made me lose what should have been mine. Our movies made us both into cowboys, but only one of us was a snake. Along with the letter was a small leather pouch that held a yellowed newspaper piece about Wayne's win for the Academy Award for True Grit. The photo of Wayne had his face carefully cut out of it. Scott couldn't stand to look at his enemy, even after he was dead. The most telling thing was a part of Scott's will that shocked even people who knew how bad the feud was. Scott set up a private foundation whose only goal was to fund academic books and articles that compare what he called the mythology of John Wayne to the reality. For years, the foundation worked in the background, giving study grants to writers who wanted to look at Wayne's career and personal life with a critical eye. One film expert who looked into the foundation's impact said that Scott's supposed grudge may have been his most powerful. It was mostly Scott's foundation that helped fund many of the critical reevaluations of Wayne's impact that came out in the 1990s and 2000. Yes, he reached out from beyond the dead to make sure that people would question Wayne's image in the future. Of course, he harmed my honor. Charged? What does that mean? The history of getting even. Not only was the Scott-Wayne feud very intense and lasted a long time, but it was also very well hidden from the public while they were alive. These men kept quiet in public, hiding one of Hollywood's worst personal feuds. Today, celebrities air their complaints on social media. One film historian said that these guys could not be in the same city without security being stepped up. But to viewers, they were both the same kind of Western hero. They hated each other so much that Scott allegedly added a clause to his will that said his movies couldn't be shown in festivals or retrospectives that also had Wayne's work. The last irony came to light while the Academy Museum was getting ready for a 2019 Western film showcase. It was found that Scott's estate still upholds this rule, which means that their movies cannot be shown in the same program series, even though both men died more than 40 years ago. The manager said that the fight would last forever. We can't legally show their movies together because Scott hated them so much that he made sure it would last forever. Because of how much they hate each other, film historians have had to rethink both men's job choices. Now it looks like Wayne's choice to make The Sons of Katie Elder in 1965, based on a story that was originally written for Scott, was an intentional use of material related to his foe. In the same way, Scott's move toward darker, less clear-cut westerns with director Bud Boticher in the late 1950s could be seen as a direct answer to Wayne's more straightforward heroism. In how they described themselves, they were at odds with each other. Wayne became more rigidly heroic as Scott explored moral complexity. Their personal hatred actually pushed both men to make more unique artistic choices, inadvertently strengthening both their legacies. Perhaps the most telling assessment came from director Howard Hawks, who worked with both men and saw their animosity firsthand. In an interview found in 2020 that had not been published before, Hawks said, "Wayne and Scott brought authenticity to their Western heroes because they actually lived by that frontier code. Once crossed, there was no forgiveness, only vengeance. The difference was their real-life war didn't end when the credits rolled." This evaluation gains poignancy considering Hawks directed Wayne in Red River, a film many critics consider Wayne's finest performance. What audiences never knew was that Hawks had originally developed the project with Scott in mind, shifting to Wayne only after studio politics made Scott unavailable. According to Hawks' private papers, Scott never forgave the director for this perceived betrayal, refusing to speak to him at industry events for the rest of his life. "I'll count 3, and if you're not out of the house, then I'll loosen on you." If you say 3, mister, you'll never hear the man count 10. The cultural impact. The Scott-Wayne rivalry, though hidden from public view during their lifetimes, ultimately shaped the entire Western genre in ways scholars are only now beginning to fully appreciate. Their determination to differentiate themselves from each other pushed both actors to refine and distinguish their screen personas. Wayne doubled down on his larger-than-life heroism, embracing a certain mythic quality that culminated in films like The Searchers and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. Scott, meanwhile, gravitated toward more nuanced, psychologically complex characters in his celebrated collaborations with directors like Bud Bedker and Sam Peckinpah. Their hatred inadvertently created a more diverse Western genre, noted film critic Andrew Sarris. Wayne embodied the mythic ceremonial Western tradition, while Scott explored a grittier, more morally ambiguous frontier. Audiences benefited from this rivalry without ever knowing it existed. The separation extended to supporting casts with character actors like Lee Van Cleef, James Coburn, and Richard Boone appearing exclusively in Scott's later westerns, while Ward Bond, Harry Carey Jr., and Ben Johnson became fixtures in Wayne productions. This division created distinct acting companies that contributed to the different atmospheric qualities of their respective films. Most significantly, their feud indirectly influenced the development of the anti-Western movement of the 1960s and 70s. Scott's later films with their morally compromised heroes and psychological complexity provided a template for the revisionist Westerns that would eventually challenge and deconstruct the very mythic tradition Wayne represented. Without realizing it, audiences were watching a genre divide itself along the battle lines of the Scott-Wayne feud. Observe director Sam Peckinpah, who worked with Scott, but never with Wayne. The Western's evolution from mythic simplicity to moral complexity paralleled these men's determination to establish separate artistic territories. The Scott-Wayne feud represents Hollywood hatred in its purest form, a vendetta ignited by career sabotage, fueled by blacklist betrayal, and maintained with unrelenting purpose until death. What began with Wayne's underhanded tactics to secure the stagecoach role evolved into a decades-long blood feud that altered both men's careers and left physical and psychological scars that never healed. Unlike manufactured publicity rivalries, their hatred was deeply personal and dangerously real. The Academy Awards confrontation, Scott's bullet-riddled Wayne target, and his deathbed refusal of reconciliation reveal a level of genuine animosity rarely seen, even in an industry known for oversized egos and grudges. Perhaps most remarkable is how thoroughly this feud was concealed from the public during both men's lifetimes. While they projected strength, honor, and moral clarity through their Western heroes, behind the scenes, they engaged in a ruthless war that contradicted everything those screen characters represented. The final word on their legendary hatred appropriately belongs to John Ford, the director whose stagecoach decision unintentionally launched the decades-long feud. In a recently discovered letter to producer Hal Wallace dated 1964, Ford reflected, "I sometimes wonder if I'm responsible for the bitterest rivalry Hollywood has ever seen. By choosing Wayne for Ringo, I may have made his career and broken something in Scott that never healed." Both men became exactly who they needed to be on screen because of it. Wayne, the embodiment of American certainty. Scott, the questioner of those same certainties. Their hatred created two perfect opposing forces in the Western tradition. Like the North and South Poles, they defined each other by their absolute opposition. But God help anyone who got caught between them. Today, as both men's films continue to define the Western genre for new generations, few viewers realize they're watching two legends who would have gladly destroyed each other given the opportunity. Their iconic cowboy personas, forever linked in film history, disguise what may have been Hollywood's most perfect hate. A hatred that outlasted both men and continues to separate their legacies even today. If you found this glimpse into Hollywood's hidden history fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more revelations from the golden age of cinema. Let us know in the comments which classic Hollywood feud you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for joining us on this journey behind the silver screen's carefully maintained facade.